This morning, the former Prime Minister of Sri Lanka, Mr. Ranil Wickremesinghe. Thank you very much for speaking to CNN News 18. I have been seeing your memoirs, I have been seeing your tributes which you played to Dr. Manmohan Singh. When was it the first time that you met him, and what was your first impression about him?
The line is not clear.
Mr. Wickremesinghe, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now.
I was reading your tributes. When was the first time that you met Dr. Manmohan Singh? And in fact, what was the first impression that you were left with when you immediately met him for the first time?
I met him for the first time in 1992. I called to meet Prime Minister Narasimha Rao. I was the leader of the House, and Minister of Industries had introduced the second generation economic reforms. When I met Dr. Manmohan Singh, firstly what struck me was that he was not a politician. He knew his subject, he was cool, he was calm, and he had the ability to steer the Ministry of Finance through the vast reforms that were taking place. My discussions with him was firstly on how we opened up in Sri Lanka, the reactions we had, and I said, yours are going to be much worse because the Congress government's, Congress party's affiliation with many other left-wing groups and with the trade unions. And secondly, I also told him how I have brought in the second generation of economic reforms and the problems that were associated with it. He appreciated it. He asked me a number of questions, and I left with the impression that a very, very thoughtful person who's worked this out and who was determined to stay it through. When we opened out in 1977, President Jayawardena had Mr. Ronnie DeMille as his finance minister, and he also took a similar approach. So I was really heartened by it. I met him again the next year when I visited India again after I became Prime Minister, and he briefed me on the progress that was taking place. So I said, look, we must all try and work together to bring these reforms.
But Mr. Wickremesinghe, he was also very aware of the fact that India's neighborhood will also have to be our friends, whether it's Sri Lanka, whether it's Afghanistan, whether it's Bangladesh. When you would meet him, would he talk a lot about the fact that apart from the rich legacy and history Sri Lanka and India shares, about other countries in the neighborhood? I mean, you know, for example, Afghanistan, which was new, which was on this path of change a bit, Mr. Hamid Karzai becoming the head of the government over there, Bangladesh, Pakistan, because we had a tricky relationship. Would you talk about that also with you?
No, when I met him next, I was really no longer the Prime Minister, I was the leader of the opposition. And he had become Prime Minister. That was about after they won the elections in 2004. I'd met him earlier, but on those occasions I was in the opposition and he was in the opposition. Then between 2001 and 2004 I met him together with Mrs. Sonia Gandhi. There the interest was more on the issue of the peace talks, but he spoke with me about Sri Lanka's economic positions, where we had a negative growth in 2001. But after thereafter, when I met him as Prime Minister, he would generally talk about the war and the aftermath of the war, the political solution, the question of the displaced people. Those were the issues that were foremost on his mind. After 2015, when I became Prime Minister and I was taking on the new reforms and also the discussions we had with the IMF, then he would ask me on and off questions about what we were doing. He used to come together with Mrs. Sonia Gandhi, and his questions were and discussions were about the economic situation in Sri Lanka.
The economics of his, which we often talk about, and the finance minister and the liberalization that he spoke to us about. But and also his diplomatic skills. If you would be able to tell us a bit about that, because I'm sure you met him many times, and you both must have discussed the need for countries, especially in South Asia, also to assert themselves in the world economy and the global stage. We should not be looked upon as third world or developing countries. Would he talk about that to you as well?
Yes, the need for South Asia to open up and become strong economically. I mean, he and I both agreed our real problem was economic weakness, and that was due to the outdated policies we followed. It was how we were going to bring it in. For him, he had to bring it through the Congress party, as I said earlier, which had different wings, and the allies who were not that supportive of the reforms. So he had that problem. But basically, we felt that there was a lot of potential in South Asia and the surrounding countries. It was a question of how do we tap it. Once you do it, the rest could be worked out.
Mm-hmm. And also, Mr. Wickramasinghe, today he leaves behind a legacy and the rich tributes that he's getting even from his political opponents at one point of time. What is the legacy for you personally and for Sri Lanka and for our country and the world that he leaves behind as he sets sail on his last journey?
He left behind a stronger India, and what I admired of him was the need to have economic reforms. Now, Sri Lanka started in 77, we were standing alone. But once he came in, India came in, then Bangladesh followed. I mean, this is long after China opened up and even Vietnam. So we had to get there. His contribution was in opening out the economy. The decision was taken by Mr. Narasimha Rao, but the strategies was put in place by him. If the strategies were wrong, it would not have succeeded. And it was carried on, as I said yesterday, by Mr. Vajpayee, and then again by Dr. Manmohan Singh as Prime Minister, and you made a very strong economy. And now under Prime Minister Modi, you are looking at becoming one of the top 3 global economies. If you did not do that in the first budget speech, you won't be talking today of becoming one of the top 3 economies in the world. That's why it has worked out in 3 decades. So I would say Dr. Manmohan Singh was instrumental in putting the strategies into place. Without this, you could have fallen. Very, very sound strategies on which you could carry it out. And then at the same time, he looked at the other aspects also, like the social needs, the poverty, and the different legislations he brought in. And of course, addition to the economic reforms, when you are looking at this region, he had one more achievement, which is a civil nuclear agreement. And that really took India to the next level.
And the last question to you, Mr. Wickramasinghe. He's known to be a man of few words, but was it very difficult for you to strike a conversation with him?
No, I had no difficulty because we talked on topics that both of us like to discuss. I had no problem at all with him. He was measured in his words, I would say, and I appreciated that.
Thank you very, very much, Mr. Wickramasinghe, for speaking to CNN News 18 and sharing your thoughts of Dr. Manmohan Singh. Thank you very much for speaking to us.